the last week we looked at Solomon's temple and how he built the temple and how the temple was really, really
hmm
expensive. And we looked and saw how he prayed. And in his prayer, he asked God to bless the people and to bless him and to help them to be people who follow God. In fact, if you look at the prayer, it says, we need to follow God so that he will be with us. And if we don't follow God, he will discipline us. So he mentions the Mosaic covenant. And at the last week, we saw at the end of verse chapter 9, we saw the people were in Jerusalem for 2 weeks. They blessed the king and went home joyful and glad in heart for all the good things the Lord had done for his servant David and his people Israel. So everything is great. The presence of God is in the temple. The temple is built. But you remember he built his palace too. Remember that? And the building of the temple took how long?
7 years,
And how long was his house?
13 years.
Almost twice as long, and something is not right. So, but it looks okay. And then in chapter 10, in Second Chronicles 7, we have God appearing again. First Kings 9 and Second Chronicles 7. Notice with me verse 2 in chapter 9. The Lord appeared to him a second time as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. And in this prayer, we find the parallel in Second Chronicles 7. We'll look at both of them a little bit. Notice what God says to him. I've heard your prayer. I've consecrated the temple. My eyes and heart will always be there. And then God says two things. As for you, if you walk before me. Did you see that? Look at verse 6. But if you or your sons turn away from me, okay? So in this response of God, he reminds them of the Davidic covenant. Now, the Davidic covenant we saw last spring, it said this: God will use the house of David to rule over the world. In fact, we talked about that last Sunday in Psalm 2. But in this Davidic covenant, there is a condition, and it has to do with the obedience of the king. If he is obeying, God will bless him and he will have a great reign. If not, God will discipline him. Now, it's not that the Davidic covenant has a condition, but the protection of each king is conditioned on their obedience. So you see that in verse 4, in verse 6. Notice what it says in verse 4. Verse 4 is the positive. As for you, if you walk before me in integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father, when I said, you shall never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. Did you see what the condition is? That he lives his life in integrity of heart and in uprightness. And then he makes a comparison, just as David. Now, tell me what you remember about David. Was he always a good king?
No.
No.
Not always.
He had a problem, didn't he?
Mhm.
Uh, Bathsheba was a problem.
Yeah,
And
the
while some
rest,
people try,
Behavior.
and the
yeah,
rest of the wives.
and the rest of the wives, but Bathsheba, she was the big problem for him. And it's not that Bathsheba is at fault, it's David is at fault.
Yeah.
And he committed adultery and murdered. Those are things that are really not following God's commandments, right? But did you notice what he said? If you do like David your father, living in integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, then I will bless you. And you see, part of living with integrity and uprightness of heart means when we sin, we admit to it, we own up, we confess it, and then we start over again. You know, you remember Saul? With Saul, it was always somebody else's fault. It wasn't really that bad. It's the people forced me to do it. And David and Saul are different. So God is not an application that I have for us. God is not expecting perfection. Now, I know we think he wants us to be perfect, but he's not expecting perfection. He knows we will sin. But the question is, how do we deal with the sin? Do we cover it up? Do we blame somebody else? Do we, oh, hopefully this won't happen to you, continue in our sin? And you see, that's why we cover it up, so we can continue. And David didn't do that. That's why he walks in, did you notice again what it said? In integrity of heart and uprightness. So that's the positive part of God's answer. Notice the negative part, verse 6. But if you or your sons turn away from me and do not observe the commands and the decrees that I have given, and go off and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them. I will reject the temple that I have consecrated for my name, and Israel will become a byword, that means a proverb, and an object of ridicule among all peoples. Although this temple is imposing now, all who walk by it will be appalled and scoff and say, why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and this temple? And the people will answer, because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought out their fathers out of Egypt, and embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. This is why the Lord brought up all this disaster upon them. Let's see the negative part. If obedient, no problems. If disobedient, did you notice how it's described? You go off and serve other gods and worship them. Notice that's in verse 6. Notice in verse 7. They have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. So, worshiping and serving other gods, not good. God will deal with them. God will remove his protection from the temple, from Israel, and God will bring, did you notice what it said? Disaster upon them. So let's think about that for a minute. Which one would you choose? Divine blessing or divine discipline? Your choice. What do you think, Gabi?
I'm Gabi, okay?
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
I was just kind of thinking, we are sitting here and saying, yes, we would do differently. And yes, we have the choice today, every one of us. But are we better than they have been in former times? And the second question is, he talks not only to the individuals, but to the ones in responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. We think we would never do that, right? We're no better than they are. We do that every day. And see, while we believe God will bless and God will discipline, we choose sin with God's discipline over obedience with God's blessing. Did I say that again? We choose sin over with God's discipline over obedience with God's blessing. And if you look at it objectively, you have to say, how stupid can we be? Now, I'm sure you wouldn't make decisions like that, choosing God, sin and God's discipline over blessing and obedience. I'm sure you wouldn't do that. Maybe me, just me. And you need to say, how stupid can you be? Notice in 2 Chronicles 7, he explains a little bit more. And let's look at verse 13. The person who wrote Chronicles added this. When I shut up the heavens, so there is no rain, that is, when I send discipline, that's one of the disciplines of God when they are disobedient. when I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command the locusts to devour the land, or send a plague upon my people. So when God sends discipline, notice verse 14, one of my favorite verses in Chronicles. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn away from their wicked ways, I will hear from heaven. Did you notice what it says? And forgive their sin. And I will heal their land. Now, I do understand this is in the context given to Israel, but I think the principle is true. When God sends discipline, it's designed to drive us back to Him. And the way back to Him is through humility. That is, we recognize our sin and we pray and we seek His face and we turn from our wicked ways. You want a good example of that? It's in Jonah chapter 3. The Ninevites, not good people, really, really bad, brutal. Actually, if God would wipe them out, the whole world would be better off. And God sent a prophet to them with the name of Jonah. And the prophet was not real happy about being there, and his sermon was really short, very repetitive. In 40 days, God will destroy Nineveh. No introduction, no conclusion, no illustration, no poem, no songs, nothing positive. In 40 days, God's going to kill you. And you know what the people did? They did exactly what is said here. They repented. They turned from their wicked ways. They said, it's interesting what they said. Maybe God will relent and not punish us. It's not quid pro quo. It's not, I will repent and God will repent too. And not, it's, we deserve it. And we cast ourselves on his mercy. Perhaps He will not discipline us. Interesting, in Jonah 3, it says, and He did. He did not send judgment. So, verse 14, if my people who are called by my name, they know how He is, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sins and I will heal their land. So maybe you have problems in your family. This is a good verse. If my people who are called by my name, humble themselves, admit I'm wrong, pray, God forgive me, seek my face, what should I do? I will stop doing hurtful things. Then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land. Did you notice? It's not me doing the healing. It's not me telling the other person, well, this is the way you do it. You just do my way and we don't have any conflict. It's God works on me and God works on the other person, and it's God who does the healing. Notice the end of the prayer in chapter 7, verse 22. When they don't obey God and serve other gods and worship him, I will uproot Israel. I will make it a byword. And people will say, as an answer to the question, why did God do this? Because they have forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers, and who brought them out of Egypt, and embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. This is why he brought all this disaster upon them. Did you notice? Same phrase in both books, in Kings and in Chronicles. And that's going to become a major theme in both books. In Kings, the theme is developed. Why did the Davidic kingship fail? Answer: they served other gods and worshiped them. And in Chronicles, how can we be successful now that God has brought us back to the land? How can we be successful? Well, we turn from our wicked ways. We humble ourselves. We do what God wants us to, and then he will bless us. But our default setting is worshiping other gods and serving other gods. That's our default setting. And Chronicles tries to help us not to do that. So let's go back to 1 Kings, and then we'll see what's going on there. So,
Buddy, before you move on, I just wanted to ask you, you started off in verse 4, and for me, this is very important. So before you move on, I thought I should maybe mention it. Isn't this all about the temple, though? Because Solomon has built a temple, and God, like for example, in First Kings 9, verse 3, God says, I have heard the prayer and the plea you have made before me. I have consecrated this temple which you have built by putting my name there forever. That means actually God has put his name forever in that place, in that temple. And it also says, my eyes, my heart, and my heart will always be there. So these words, forever and always be there. I thought this was very important because he in Second Chronicles he repeats this, whoever wrote it, because he says in verse 15, which I didn't hear. That's why I just wanted to mention this. Again, in chapter 7, verse 12, he says, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a temple. So for me, was the location, this place is kind of
Mhm.
very important. That's what I thought. And then again in verse 15, he goes and he says, now my eye, God says, now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayers offered in this place. I have
Mhm.
chosen and consecrated this temple so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. So it's like he's using these words,
Mhm.
always, forever. And I really thought it's maybe I think it's a this the place or the temple has been given a
Mhm.
lot of significance. What
Yeah.
do you say?
Um, there is a problem with what you're saying.
Okay.
Notice what it says. Verse 7 in 1 Kings 9. Then I will cut off Israel from the land, and I will
Mhm.
reject this temple.
If they do
And
something
all
wrong,
the
yes.
and all
Mhm.
and though this temple is now imposing,
Mhm.
all who pass by will be appalled and
Mhm.
scoff and say, why has God done such a thing? And they will say, because his people served other gods.
Mhm.
And that's what happened in 586.
Mhm.
That's what happened in 70 AD. And so, yes, the temple is to be forever, but it's always conditioned on the people being obedient. And unfortunately, I choose my words carefully, we are not. You see what I mean? Yes, it's going to be forever, but it's conditional. Saul's offer was kingship forever, but it's conditional. Solomon, your descendants will always rule if you are obedient. It's conditional. And so, both in Kings and Chronicles, the temple is the symbol of God's presence, where people come and pray. That's why he hears. It's the symbol of his blessing.
Yeah, but Jesus is going to come back again to the same place, like Jerusalem. I'm talking about the location more. Like he's not going to come to, I don't know. It says specifically
To the
he's going
Mount
to
of
enter the
Olives.
East Gate, and
Yeah, to the Mount of
so the
Olives.
location is pretty significant, isn't it? Jerusalem is chosen. I mean, it's what he's saying here.
Well, it is the place where
Okay.
God lets his name dwell. It
Mhm.
is, I would say it this way. You're saying the place is significant.
Yeah, because he
And
repeats it so much, so often.
I would say, not the place. It's the God who dwells there.
Yeah, but he has
Okay.
chosen it, isn't it?
Yes, but it's not the place.
Okay.
It's the person. It's the city of the great king. It's not the great city of the king. See what
Mhm.
I mean? See the difference?
Yes, I
Jerusalem
was thinking
has
only
its,
because you put those prayers in the Wailing Wall because it's a temple. And why do they do this? The presence of God, He promises is going to be there always and forever. And in this place, like it says,
yeah,
I will be
I am,
attentive.
I am not
For,
convinced
okay.
that putting a prayer in the Wailing Wall will gain you more chances of God answering it. That's what they
Yeah.
think. That's
No, I
really
think it's
what
a
they think.
presence that's counting, not the piece of paper or the
Yeah.
prayer. Yeah, it's a
And,
presence.
you know, they will say, we're going to go and talk to the name. They will say that. Unfortunately, the name is not there.
But he will come again in that
He will
place, the
come
same
again, but he's
location.
not there now.
Mm,
Okay. So that's what I'm saying. The place is significant because of the presence of God.
yes.
It's not the place.
I don't know.
See?
I think it's
Okay, just look at Haggai. God
yeah.
says, what is more important? A pretty building or a less pretty building with the presence of God? The great building of Solomon had no presence.
hmm
God wasn't there. He abandoned his people because of their sin. Okay? And so we're going to see that develop as we go through the book of Kings and Chronicles. Okay? We're going to see that develop. But it's already starting off um, at the very beginning when everything is going really, really well. That's already going to be there. And this promise is conditional. Okay? So notice what else Solomon does. At the end of 20 years, during which Solomon built these two buildings, the temple and the royal palace, King Solomon gave 20 towns in Galilee to Hiram, because Hiram supplied him with the cedar and pine and gold he wanted. So he's trading land for things that he wants. That's not really what he's supposed to do. And then Hiram's not happy with the villages he got. He says, I gave you a lot and you gave me nothing. And so he's not happy.
But you know what amazes me? After that, he gives them 120 talents of gold. How can
Yeah.
that be?
Well,
I
um,
don't quite understand.
well, these I don't understand exactly either. Now, Hiram had sent the 120 talents of gold to Solomon. I think what it means is this is all what Hiram had given him. And so these towns are the payment for that, for the talents of gold. And Hiram is not really happy with that. Notice something else. Here's the account of the forced labor that Solomon conscripted to build the Lord's temple, his own palace, and supporting terraces, the wall of Jerusalem, Hatzor, Megiddo, and Gezer. So he used conscripted labor. He forced the people to work for him. All the people from the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, their descendants who were remaining in the land, Solomon conscripted for his slave labor force. Now, Solomon did not make slaves of any of the Israelites, but all the foreigners he made into slaves, and he forced them to work. Now, do you remember what God told Abraham? You and your descendants are supposed to be a blessing to the world. This house that I have, Jeremiah says it's supposed to be a house of prayer for all the nations. Would you go and pray there if you had to build it as a slave? Not, you would say, I don't really like having to work as a slave. After Pharaoh's daughter came from the city of David to the palace Solomon built for her, he constructed supporting terraces. Do you know why he didn't bring the Pharaoh's daughter into this holy place? Because she was a foreigner. And 3 times a year, Solomon sacrificed burnt offerings on the altar he built for the Lord, burning incense before the Lord along with them, and so fulfilled the temple obligations. King Solomon also built ships at Etzon Geber, which is Eilat. And Hiram sent his men who knew the sea to serve in the fleet with Solomon's men. And they sailed to Ophir, and they brought back 420 talents of gold, which they delivered to King Solomon. Now, this afternoon, I sat down and I figured out how much a talent of gold is. A talent of gold is about 34 kilos. Not bad, right? And he brought in back 420. So you may say, how much is a kilo of gold worth? Well, the price of gold has fallen significantly since the Iran war. And it's down to about 150,000 euros a kilo. So Kathy and I are going to keep the gold that we have. We're not going to sell it now because it's gone down. We only have 4 or 5 kilos. If you think that, that's not true. We don't have that kind of gold. So one kilo is worth 150,000 euros. And from one business, he gets 420 talents of gold. That is 2,142,000 euros. That's a lot of money. He had a lot of money. And that's just his income from one business. And the way the verb is written in Hebrew, this seems to be iterative, that this happened every year. So every year, 2 billion euros, 2 Milliarden Euro. That's not bad. That's a pretty good income. So things went really well. In verse 10, we see the Queen of Sheba heard about the famous Solomon and his relationship to the name of the Lord, and she came to test him with hard questions. She arrived at Jerusalem with a very great caravan, with camels carrying spices and large quantities of gold and precious stone. And she came to Solomon and talked to him about all that she had on her mind. And when the queen saw Solomon answered all of her questions, nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace that he built, did you notice? She doesn't mention the temple. See that? When she saw all the wisdom of Solomon, the palace that he built, the food on the table, and the seating of his officials, and the attending servants in their robes, and his cupbearers and burnt offerings made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. She said, normally your fame is exaggerated. So people tell about catching a fish, and they caught a fish about like this. And the more you tell the story, the bigger the fish is, and it grows and grows and grows, and until it's a whale. That's what happens when your reputation is repeated over and over again and people exaggerate. And notice what she says in verse 6. The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, even half of what was told to me in wisdom and wealth you have far exceeded the report I have heard. How happy your men must be, and how happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Praise to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's loving loyalty for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness. And what does she do? Verse 10. She gives him 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stone. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. So again, 120 talents of gold. That's not bad. How would you like to have somebody come and visit you and bring you 120 talents of gold? So that is what? 120 times 47. I could live with that. In fact, if you only wanted to bring me 10, I would be happy. Notice verse 11. And Hiram's ship brought gold from Ophir, and from there they brought great cargoes of almug wood and precious stones. And he used the wood for supports in the temple of the Lord and to make harps and lyres. Solomon gave the queen of Sheba all she desired and asked for, besides of what he had given her out of his royal bounty. And she left and returned with her people to her own country. So, the temple and God's blessing, it's doing its job. People hear and they come. And did you notice what she said? This must be a great blessing from God to Israel because of him putting Solomon on the throne. You see, it's the God of Israel who blesses. And his blessing is seen by all these people, and they are drawn to him. Solomon's splendor is now described. The weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents, not including the revenue from the merchants and traders and from all the Arabian kings and the governors of the land. Okay, so 660 talents of silver is 3,396,600 3,396,600,000 euros every year. That's in addition to what comes in through a lot. That's in addition to all the taxes he collects from people bringing in and using his roads to that he collects taxes on. So he's doing quite well. This is not counting the tax on Israel. Israel pays for all of his expenses. This is just his personal income. You know, the richest man in the world has about 800 trillion euros. His name is Elon Musk. That's everything that he has. He makes per year a tenth of what Solomon made per year. A tenth. Do you see how God blesses Solomon? Now, may I ask you a question? Just think about it for a moment. Would you be willing to serve this God if he blesses you in that way? He gives you fame and fortune, so much so you don't even know what to do with all your fortune. Would you be willing to serve them?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. No? Okay, Dolly, you had a question.
Yes. This number, verse 13, 666, does it have any meaning for you?
No,
No.
no, no. I don't know what the number in Revelation means. But here, I think it has to do with the amount of money that
Okay.
comes in.
Sure. So, but it doesn't say anything.
No,
Okay, to you.
no,
Okay.
I don't think so. Notice what he does with the money. He makes 200 large shields of hammered gold. He has 300 smaller shields. He puts them in the palace. Notice his throne. He makes a great throne inlaid with ivory and overlaid with fine gold. The throne had 6 steps, and its back had a rounded top. On both sides of the seat were armrests with a lion standing beside each one of them. 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one on either end of each step. Nothing like it had ever been made for any other kingdom. All King Solomon's goblets were gold. All the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered little value in Solomon's day. You know, at the price of silver today, we would say silver is valuable, really valuable. And they said, here, you want a kilo of silver? We don't need it. We have gold. Verse 23. King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. You remember what God promised him? I will give you riches and wisdom and fame. The whole world sought audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom of God, the wisdom God had put in his heart. Year after year, everyone who came brought a gift, articles of silver. Well, silver was for the poor people, and gold, robes, arms, spices, horses, mules. And Solomon accumulated chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses, which he kept in the chariot cities, also with him in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone, and cedar as plentiful as sycamore trees in the foothills. And Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt. They imported a chariot from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver and a horse for 150. They exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and the Arameans. Would you say successful? Really successful. I mean, he had wisdom. He knew how to make money. He knew how to answer questions. He knew everything. So, Dolly, you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that there's Jews in India and from time of Solomon, and this is where it's related to, because he was getting all these ships going back and forth, and you can see here he got not just gold and silver, but weapons, spices,
Mhm.
horses, apes,
Yeah.
and baboons and stuff. So yeah, they kind of related that this was also the Jewish. This was the time when the Jews like went to India, or
Well,
Indian Jews came from that
we
time also.
know that Ophir is Saudi Arabia. Um, Perhaps they went to India. Perhaps.
Yeah, they have the synagogues and all these,
Yeah.
all these artifacts and
Yeah.
stuff.
Synagogues are really late. Synagogues are starting at 200.
Yeah, they're
Before.
places of worship. There's a lot
Yeah.
of
I'm
things
just saying. Yeah.
yeah.
But the Bible doesn't indicate how far they went. I just don't know.
Mm.
Uh, some people say, well, Solomon had an affair with the Queen of Sheba, and his son then rules in Ethiopia, and that's where the Jews from Ethiopia come. Perhaps. Old Testament doesn't indicate that.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course, Old Testament.
I'm not
But they,
saying it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
true. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
saying
They
Old
found
Testament
in
doesn't say
Africa, they
anything.
found those tribes who have all these Jewish traditions, and they don't know how come these people are celebrating
Mhm.
these Jewish
Yeah.
traditions out of nowhere, and that's why
Yeah.
they're relating them to the Queen of
Yeah.
Sheba.
People
And
say,
yeah,
particularly in Nigeria, you have that. Perhaps. I don't know.
mm,
I don't know if they are Jewish, if and how they got there. I just don't know.
yeah. What that's what I'm saying. In Israel, they've done pretty much all these what do you say, archaeology and all this stuff, and the same thing in India. They found so much stuff, and that's what they're relating this to. Like one of those times was those shipments from Solomon. This period. Yeah.
It's possible. We
Mm.
just don't know. But the Old Testament does not say.
Yeah. It does mention India. It does mention India. Esther chapter 1 verse 1. It's India is mentioned twice.
Yes, yes, but
Yeah.
that's with the Persians or the Iranians. Their kingdom went as far as the borders of India.
Yeah, but the Jewish people were concerned from
Mhm,
all those Jews in this area were supposed to be
mhm. Yeah,
annihilated. Yeah.
it's possible. I can't say,
Mm.
but we don't know exactly what happened, how far his um, business ventures went. Bill Gates, his total income is 100 billion euros. That's all he has. Elon Musk has 10 times that amount. And Solomon, for 1 year, he beats Elon Musk. I mean, he was very successful. And the question that you have is, how is it possible to live with such success? You know, just give me $1 billion, okay? Not even euros, even with the dollar being the way it is. Give me $1 billion, I will be happy. How about you? Would anybody be happy with $1 billion? Okay, you have to pay tax on it. Say you have to pay 50% tax on it. 500 million, I can live with that. And if we had this much money, we wouldn't have any problems, would we? We could go on vacation to wherever we wanted to. If we didn't like the hotel, we'll buy it and burn it down. We'll build our own hotel the way we like it. Everything is great and wonderful for Solomon. But do you remember what the king's law in Deuteronomy 17 says?
Don't pile up riches.
Don't, don't pile up riches.
Don't have many horses. Don't have
Don't have
many
many
wives.
horses.
And many wives.
Don't have many wives.
Right.
And why not? Because then you think you can do everything. You know what Proverbs says? Don't make me rich, so I will forget you. And don't let me be poor, so I will dishonor you by stealing. And it's a heavy lot to live with wealth. Because the tendency is, look what I have done. And so all these things that God does to bless Solomon, all these things drive his heart or cause his heart to be far away from God. We already saw that with him marrying the daughter of Pharaoh at the very beginning. And there was a small wound. And over time, with the money and fame, he gets further and further away from God. When I teach this in class, I say, Solomon was the wisest fool who ever lived. He was wise. He knew how to do things, but he forgot what is important. Notice chapter 11, verse 1. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women. Besides Pharaoh's daughter, he loved Moabites and Ammonites and Edomites and Sidonians and Hittites. They were from the nation about which the Lord had told Israelites, do not intermarry with them. Because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. God says, don't. Solomon says, it's okay. I'm Solomon. I'm wise. I'm wealthy. This is good for me. Nevertheless, Solomon held fast. You know what this word means? It's the same word that's used in Genesis 3, where Adam is supposed to cleave to Eve. He grabbed him and held fast and wouldn't let him go. He held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth, 300 concubines. Now, can you imagine this? If he went and visited every woman for one night, it would take him 2.5 years to see every woman. And he'll go up to them and say, and what's your name? And how many children do we have? Goodness, 1,000 wives. And if even half of them have children, that's why you had to work so much. Can you imagine being responsible for 500 children? And he probably had a lot more than that. Did you notice what it says at the end of verse 3? And his wives led him astray. You know, what did God tell him? Don't marry these women. They will lead you astray. What was the condition for him to enjoy this obedience? Walk in integrity and uprightness. Don't serve the other gods. If you do, divine discipline. And as Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods. And his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God as the heart David his father had been. And he followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Moloch, the detestable god of the Ammonites. And so Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. And on a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Moloch, the detestable god of the Ammonites. And he did the same for all of his foreign wives, who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. Now, we found statues for Moloch. In fact, in his name is actually not Moloch, it's Malek, king. But the Jews hated him so much, they put the vowels O and E in it from the word Boshet. Now, Dolly, what does Boshet mean? Shame.
Ach so, okay.
Shame.
Litbayesh. It's coming from
Yeah,
Litbayesh, yeah.
yeah, it's shame. And they claim that he is king, and we view him as shameful. You know why they did? They viewed him as shameful. We have his statues, and they're made out of iron, and they're hollow on the inside. And you will heat them up, and then you'll place your child in the outstretched hands of this God, and the child would burn to death. Painful. And Solomon built altars for him. Do you see why I said he's the wisest fool who ever lived? And having God's wisdom and having God's blessing and having all the opportunity does not guarantee that we walk in integrity of heart and with uprightness. The Lord became angry with Solomon because of his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. And although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's commands. So the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees which I have commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it from the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." And Solomon is tragic. He had every opportunity. He was successful beyond measure. And he was a fool because he chose to worship other gods and not the living God who appeared to him. You know why he does that? He thinks he knows better. And I can get by and do the things that I want to because of Look how successful I am. And isn't that the same temptation we face? Look what we can do with all the things we have. And when you have nothing, you're so dependent upon God. Isn't that true? Did you notice what Solomon chose? He chose sin and divine discipline over obedience and God's blessing. And that's the choice we have to face also. So, Dolly, you had a question.
Yes. Um, why do you think God didn't punish Solomon himself? I mean, he let him enjoy all these stuff and he had a good life, but he kind of punished his descendants or the throne of David. And
His
why
son.
do you think he didn't punish the person who's committing the sin other than his throne or the children or descendants?
I think he did punish Solomon. We'll have to look
He
at
had a good
that
life.
next. We'll have to look at that next week. But if you read after if you start reading in 14, Solomon had problems. He had significant problems. And it's not just Rehoboam, it's Solomon as well that is going to suffer. Now, before we leave Solomon, I do think he repented and he came back to God. And the reason I say that is because of the other three books that he wrote: Song of Solomon, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes.
Mm.
And in Ecclesiastes, Solomon says, "Don't do what I have done. I wasted my life. All these things that I thought would bring happiness, I wasted." He did so much because he had so much money, and it's all wasted. Do you know how he concludes the book? Fear God and keep his commandments,
Mhm.
because he
This
will.
is the whole.
Oh, Dolly,
Yeah,
he will.
because this is the whole commandment or something. I
No,
don't know the exact
because
wording.
he will judge you.
Mm.
Whatever is secret and hidden, he will bring to life. So fear God, keep his commandments. Why? Because he will judge you. And so I do think Solomon is judged. He does, I think, return to God, and that makes the judgment less. But he ruined Rehoboam. Rehoboam followed in his footsteps and did exactly what Solomon did. Man, he lost everything. And so Solomon, I think, is a good example for us to learn. First Corinthians 10 says, the Old Testament is like a track for us to see. We can see what's going to happen if you obey or disobey. And Solomon, his life is an example. You start off really well and God blesses you, and then you forget. Notice we're going to talk a little bit more about Solomon next week, but notice his death. As for all the other events of Solomon's reign and all he did and the wisdom he displayed, are they not written in the book of the annals of Solomon? Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all of Israel 40 years. Then he rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father. And Rehoboam his son succeeded him as king. Did you notice in this description of his death, it is not positive and not negative. It doesn't say he was disobedient, and it doesn't say he was obedient. It's just neutral. And the reader is supposed to think something is bad wrong with Solomon. And if you remember the law of the kings, you know what it is.
Yeah,
The small wound in his heart over time destroyed him. You know, I've known a lot of guys who have had problems in the ministry, a lot of them. Some of them personally, some of them by acquaintance, a lot of them. They never start out with, I want to be unfaithful to God. They never start off that way. They always start off with compromise. Just a little compromise, it won't hurt. Just a little bit more, it's not too bad. Just a little bit more, I can cover it up. Just a little bit more, and people who call them out, they attack. And at the end, it's all exposed. We're like a balloon that has a small hole, and the air goes out slowly. But in the end, everybody sees. And Solomon was the wisest fool who ever lived. Now, if I were writing the book, that would be my summary of him. The wisest fool who ever lived. He knew the truth and chose different. Don't do that. It is not worth it. Just ask Solomon. You know what he says in Proverbs? My son, don't do what I did. Don't do what I did. It's too painful. And Rehoboam learned from Solomon, and he was even more disobedient. And we'll look at the problems that Solomon had in the splitting of the kingdom next week.
Maybe just a quick question.
Yes,
Who wrote the book of Kings and who wrote the book of Chronicles?
I don't know. Book of Kings was written about 550.
Mm-hmm.
Book of Chronicles was written about 450, 420. But who it is, I don't know. If you ask me to make a guess, I think there were more than one authors. For example, Isaiah was one of them. because
Isaiah.
Isaiah, because in Kings and Chronicles, what Isaiah wrote is recorded. So somebody pulled things together from different sources, and he's an editor. So I think that you can show in Kings and Chronicles, there is a final editor who put things together. Who they are, I do not know. Okay? Good.